What's the difference between this shot and this? Compositing. So let's dip our toes in that water today, huh?
Just to the right. The next square in.
This is the shot I'll be working on. On the left is a render straight out of Cycles. On the right is the composited version. What you're seeing here is camera emulation. It's basically a filter that you put on top of any render to make it look more like it was shot with a real camera. And this is the bare minimum of compositing that you can do. And ask any CGI professional, and they'll tell you that the render isn't done when it's rendered. It needs compositing. It always needs some level of compositing. And this is the part of compositing that's always added. There's always, to some degree, a level of camera emulation. In this video, we'll make a camera emulation setup in Resolve Fusion, which is free. And when you've made it, you can reuse that setup as a package node for any of your projects going forward. So I'm in Fusion, I opened DaVinci Resolve, I headed over to the magic wand at the bottom, which is the Fusion tab, and I dragged in my render. You see it as a stack of nodes, that's because it is. I did a bunch of nodes in here. If you want to know what I did, then go watch my Back to Beauty video. But for now, just treat this as if it's one image, and it can be. And let's talk about how to make this look more like it was rendered with a real camera. Now, for one, I'm working in a linear color space. In my Blender scene, I have the compositor window here, and the file output node is set to render with color management override, and I set it to linear rec 709. You need to choose a linear color space in here for compositing to work correctly, and that's what I did. Problem is, linear color looks terrible. This isn't the way it looks inside Blender. So I need to set it up so that I can view it as it was in Blender. And I'll do that in two ways. On the right here, I want to view my media out node. And you see that with the little dots on the bottom, you can set it to be viewed on the left and right viewport. And you can also press the numbers 2 and 1 on your keyboard to set nodes to different viewports. So let's, in this chain, insert an OCIO color space node. And in here, I'll press Browse and go to my Blender install folder where I find a config.ocio file. This contains the Blender color instructions to view an image like Blender does. So I'll open that, and that gives me a list of source spaces and output spaces. These are the same as in Blender. So in here, I can find my linear rec 709, which was what I rendered in. That's the source space, that's what this image is. And output space, I want to be the same as what I viewed everything in Blender. Under the render tab on the bottom, I have my color management, and this is what I'm viewing in Blender. I'm viewing AGX high contrast. So if I go over here, I can set my output space to be, at the bottom, AGX, base sRGB, that's the same as just AGX, and then the look was high contrast. So this looks exactly like it did in Blender. Now, in the left-hand viewport, I like using this as like a preview viewport for any node. So I want this to be set up to view in this color space without having to go through this node. So I'll do that with the viewport LUT. Turn that on by clicking the little grid, and then going in here and clicking OCIO color space, same as this node, and then going to Edit, and in here doing exactly the same, browsing, finding the config.ocio file, and setting it up as linear rec 709, AGX, base sRGB, and, in this case, high contrast. Now I'm set up to start working. And for this workflow, let's remember that we're trying to emulate a real camera. So let's actually break down a real camera into its constituent parts. What's the first thing we hit? The surface of the lens. So let's do our best to try and replicate the surface of a lens. What can happen there? Well, for one, we can get some dirt splashes, can't we? So let's see if we can replicate that inside of here. I'll go up to my media pool, and in here I have a lens dirt image. And you can download this for free on my Gumroad. There's a link in the description. So I'll pull this in, and I'll rename it with F2 and call it dirt, staying organized. And then let's preview that in the preview viewport by pressing 1 on my keyboard. And this is in the wrong color space. As you can see from the preview, it looks a little darker, and in here it doesn't. That's because I'm using a viewport LUT, which assumes it's in linear, but it's not. This is not a linear color space. So let's make it into linear for the purpose of this. So control space to search for a node, and then let's search CST. That brings up the color space transform. And in here, I can say that the input gamma is Rec 709, which is basically display, and the output is linear. So now it displays correctly because we're working in linear color space. And let's get that over this image. So let's do BOL channel boolean, because the channel boolean has an operation called add, and I want to add this image on top. And look at that. That adds a bunch of lens dirt over the whole thing. But I don't want to add it over the whole thing. I just want to add it over the brightest parts. And how can I do that? Well, I don't want the brightest parts per se. I want like a blurred version of the brightest parts, because this area here will like bleed over into here, and this is where we actually see it. We see it composited over the black areas. The way I like to do that is to go back to my render, and I'll add another node. I'll control space and search for glow. Now, there are a few glow nodes, and I may have more than you do. I've installed a couple custom ones, but the one we want is this square one, the one with the square icon. And let's add that, plug the render into that, and let's preview it on the left. In fact, I don't want to preview the image, I want to preview just the glow. So on the right-hand side, I'll switch from glowing image to glow alone. And I'll set the shine threshold up to 1, which is as high as it goes. But my image goes above 1, because it's a 32-bit EXR, which can go above the value of 1. And I still want to be able to control like the values above 1. So right before this node, I'll also insert a CC color corrector, holding shift to insert it into the chain. And using this, I can turn down the gain, and you can see that the mask shrinks or grows based on this gain. So this is how I'll control like the threshold. And I can control the size of the glow by going to the spread and seeing how far it spreads. And I can use this as a mask, but it's not ready to be used as a mask just yet, because this channel boolean, where I mix in the dirt, expects not a black and white image, but an alpha image. So what I actually have to do is I have to give this image an alpha channel. And that is very easy to do. We press Control Space to add a node and search BOL, the channel booleans again. And in here, I can say that to the alpha channel, I want to put either the red, green, or blue channel. It doesn't matter which one because it's a grayscale image. So let's just choose red, and that makes the image transparent where it's black and less transparent where it's white. Now, if I plug this into the channel boolean's mask input, which is the blue input, most of the dirt disappears, but you can see it still appears here around the bright parts of the window. Let's go to the channel booleans, and I'll press Control P to pass it. I think that's why it's P, to like mute it. And then you can see that's after and before and after. This is really cool. If I want to change how big it is, I can preview this in the left-hand viewport and this in the right-hand viewport, and go to the color corrector and just change the gain. And you can see I can get more dirt or less dirt. Now for this specific shot, this effect doesn't make much sense, because we're inside like a clean cockpit. Where does the dirt come from, right? So you know what? I'll just turn it down quite a lot. For this effect, you probably shouldn't have it at all. But it's nice to have here because at the end, I'm going to save everything I do as a custom node, so I want every effect to be in there. Now let's alt-click on this node to add like a reroute node, and plug that into here as well, just to stay organized. I can make sure that this whole chain has one input, and I'll add another node, which is a UND underlay. I can use this to like categorize all these nodes as. Now, I really want to rename this, but the problem is if I click it and then rename, I'm going to rename everything inside it. So I actually need to alt-click it to select just the underlay, and then F2, and I can call this dirt. Then let's just plug this into here and the output into here. And that's our dirt finished. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. I know a bit of compositing, but I'm new to Fusion. And if you are too, maybe you need a more solid foundation. If that's you, then I want to recommend Fusion and Blender VFX Masterclass. It's beginner-friendly and walks through the fundamentals. Skillshare has thousands of classes on creative skills. You can either take single classes like this one, or curated learning paths, like how to draw. I've already taken Simple Productivity, Greg McEwen's class, and I really recommend it. Helped me think differently on productivity. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Now the next thing that you might get on the surface of a lens is some condensation. Let's add some condensation. We'll do this by making a low-pass filter. There is no low-pass filter built into Fusion, but it's very easy to make ourselves. We'll just add a Gaussian blur, preview that, and blur it roughly like this amount. Actually a little more maybe. And then we'll do an MRG merge and merge the image under the Gaussian blur. Preview that as the output. And then in here, we can just turn down the blend and watch what happens. We get like this soft glow effect. Now, I know of myself that I am too big of a fan of this effect and I always overdo it. So I know that like I have to compensate. So however much I feel like is right, and I feel like kind of this is the right amount. This is before and after, before and after. I know that I need to turn it down even more. Let's turn it down to, in my case, 0.03 or 0.04, and I'll call this low pass. And while we're on cheesy effects, another cheesy effect that you can add is a star glow. Now there's a really nice star glow script that you can download. Now there are a bunch of really essential nodes that are not built into Fusion that you should have regardless. And there's a platform that you can download and install called Reactor, where you can find all of these right inside Fusion. When you have it installed, you can go to Workspace, Scripts, Reactor, and Open Reactor. And it opens this window. It's kind of like the extensions page in Blender. I'll link to a video on how to install Reactor. It's super easy. And in here, we can search for star. And then what I'm looking for is this, star glow. And while we're here, let's enable a couple of other ones that I'm going to use as well. We want ml underscore fast chroma. This is a great chromatic aberration script. And also, we want fast expo glow. Fast expo glow, fast exponential glow. This is the best glow filter that I've found. So install those two. Right, in here, let's just search for that. Star glow, press enter, and look at that. It adds a star glow to everything. Now this is very easy to overdo, like everything else. Let's increase the threshold so it only glows in like the really bright areas. And then I'll turn down the gain quite a lot. Actually, let's turn down the glare too, which is like the size of the stars. I'll turn down the gain to, it's now on 0.03, let's do 0.02. No, I always overdo this one too, let's do 0.01. I hope you can still see that through the YouTube compression, but this is before and after. Yeah, you definitely can. You definitely can. It can be a nice little thing. It can be a bit cheesy too. But let's call it for the surface of the lens and move to the next part of the lens, which the way I remember this is like it's the focus ring, but let's do like the interior of the lens. And what can happen here? Well, one thing that can happen is a vignette. So let's add a vignette, VIG, that's its own node. It's way too much to begin with, so let's just increase the softness, which is a way to reduce the intensity of this. Let's see, this is before and after, before and after. It's a lot, but I mean, it can be very nice. Let's also do a quick softening of the whole image. And in fact, I'll do this before the lens dirt because I don't want to blur the lens dirt. I want to be able to control that separately. But let's, at the very start here, just add a Gaussian blur and turn down the strength to 0. And I'll just zoom in to like a detailed area and just up the strength just a tiny little bit. Just because no lens is this sharp, right? Everything has a little bit of a blur. So this is before and after, very subtle unless you're zoomed in. Can't really tell, maybe I'll turn it down a little more. Like blurring it a little bit removes a little bit of that CGI feel. Now I also love the effect of astigmatism. One way to kind of get close to replicating it. This isn't physically accurate at all, but you can you can kind of replicate like a funky astigmatism look, which is kind of like a radial blur. So let's do a radial blur. It kind of spins the image around. Now let's look at the edge. How much spin do we want? Let's turn it down a little bit, maybe like so. And then just using an elliptical mask, preview that. I can turn this out to make kind of like a vignette. Move it up and then increase the soft edge until we get all the way to the edge. And now I can change the border width to kind of shrink and grow it as I wish. And then I'll invert it and plug that into the mask of the radial blur so that the radial blur only shows in like the edges. And this is kind of close to something that a lot of popular lenses do nowadays. Like for example, Netflix loves to use these kind of effects on their lenses. But let's increase the border a little more. I don't want the effect to be this strong. And then maybe decrease the blur amount. So that's before and after, before and after. You can really see it on the very edge. Everything we've done so far is quite subtle, but at the very end, I'll show you the before and after, and I think you'll be kind of shocked at how quickly these effects stack up, which is why I'm being quite subtle with them. I hinted at it, so let's go ahead and do it and add the chromatic aberration. Search for chroma and do the ML fast chroma, which is my favorite chromatic aberration script. If I just increase the size of this, you can see the reason it's called fast is because it calculates fast, not because it's like fast to use, although it is. So let's just zoom into some place where we can really see it and decrease it to an amount that feels realistic to me. Like usually, chromatic aberration isn't that strong, but you can kind of see it like on the very edge of things. Kind of like this. Let's look down in the corner. Yeah, that looks realistic to me. It should be very subtle. So let's see. That's before and after, before and after. Don't go overboard. Your image will look cheesy. I keep repeating myself on that, but the reason is I always do it. So it's more of like a warning to myself. You know what? Let's go all in and add a flare too. Let's go full out cheese. Flare. I actually don't know of any good lens flare scripts. I should look into that. But the built-in one is decent. There's a couple of nice presets. Let's go down to the MIR, my favorite. I'll move this flare over here to where the sky is the brightest. And to make this like proper, it should be animated together with my scene. And in this case, like I do have an animated scene, but I'm just doing this for one image right now, but you should probably track this in or animate a camera. And then for the lens flare, let's just turn down the brightness quite a lot. Actually, let's not use the glare brightness. Let's go to the global corrections and turn down the global brightness here, so that it only really... Like what I'm most interested in actually is this rainbow part over here. If I, before and after, the rainbow part is nice. So I'll actually decrease, I'll go down to the elements here and just select the flare spot, and I can turn up its softness. And I can go to the color and just make it darker. Kind of hides that a little. So this is without a flare and with a flare, without, with. I think that's nice. So let's move over to the next part of the camera, which we'll go real quick through because I'm not planning on actually using it. That is the aperture. The aperture is there to remind me that you can actually replicate depth of field and motion blur inside of Fusion, which I'm not actually going to go through here because for one, it's a little complicated, and for the other, I've baked in motion blur and depth of field into my render. So here you can see the plane in the background is blurred out, but it didn't have to be. You could render this completely sharp and then blur it in Fusion and even do motion blur, but it is more realistic to do it in Blender or your 3D software. As I look at this, like the star glow, it's a bit too much. Like I can't do this. So skipping over the aperture, we now come to the next stage, which in this case, I've just illustrated as the sensor of the camera. It's like a sensor emulation, and you can emulate a sensor, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to emulate film, because that's more trendy nowadays. And to emulate that, I'm going to move over to the color tab at the bottom. So from the magic wand to the color tab, and here we're going to emulate a film. Now, film emulation is such a huge and complicated thing. Like I could dedicate my whole channel to it without ever getting to the bottom of it. So I'm not going to do it justice in one video, and that's why we're going to do a shortcut. And I have a plugin that I really, really love, and it's called Dehancer. Let's search for DEH, Dehancer, as opposed to Enhancer. Let's drag that in and just look at what it does. This is as close as you get to like a one button improve your render. Like, I love how easily it creates such a nice effect. I usually change a couple of parameters for it. Change the film profile to Kodak Vision 500T, which is the most common in modern cinema, and down to the print film, I changed the film it's printed on to a Kodak 2383, which is also the most common, and just by default, it looks amazing. Let's change the target white to make it a little more neutral. Change the exposure a little bit and go up to the push-pull EV, kind of nail that effect to a look that I like. And so in here, you can mute it with Control D for disable. So this is before color and after. So Dehancer is not a sponsor. They didn't pay for a spot in the video. I actually just recommended because I really like the software. But I did ask them for a coupon code because I thought, hey, if I'm gonna recommend it. And they said yes. So they gave me the code SQUARES for my audience. And if you use that while buying any of their products, I think they said, you're gonna get a 10% discount and I'm gonna get a cut of the sale. So you help me stay afloat as well. But don't buy it to support me, buy it because it's actually really good. All right. Let's delete that node, keep the dehancer, and after the dehancer, let's press Alt-S to add another node. And this is the final part of the camera emulation, which I've illustrated as this weird abstract chip-looking thing. What I mean by that thing is the camera brain, like the way it stores color, the way it interprets color. And that's just to remind me that you're allowed to push and pull a bit on the color afterwards as well. You could call it grading, and I will adjust the white balance a little bit on this. I'll pull it over a little bit to the warmer side, maybe a bit more green. I'm just pulling on the offset at the bottom. So this is before and after. It's very subtle. Probably won't even come through the compression. And then I can change the gain to change the exposure of the shot, which I want to feel fairly bright. And then maybe turn down the lift a little, make it a bit deeper. So this is like my final image. It just went from pretty bad 3D render to kind of passable. And while this was quite a bit of work, watch what we can do now. Dehancer, that's one node. So this is as close you get to one click to improve, right? And in Fusion, we can also make this into one node. So let's just select everything we did in here, right click, go to macro and create macro. That brings up an intimidating looking window. Don't worry about any of this. Let's just call it camera emulation. Go to the three dots and save as group. And let's save it as, in my case, RS camera emulation. Save that. Replace the one I already have there. Let's close this. And now, whatever project you work in, you can go into the node graph, control space, and search for camera emulation. And it's here. This now becomes a compound node, which you can double click to open, and that's it. This is the same thing. So you can use this in any shot, meaning that we've just reduced going from this 3D render to this final product with just 2 nodes that you can just add to your shot. If you feel like going deeper with Fusion, then you're like me, and I'm going to be really nerding out on it on my Patreon going forward. But it's a bit too technical for YouTube, so if you want to nerd out with me, then the place to do that is patreon.com/RobinSquares.